So on today's episode of Driving Perilously, who knows what I'm going to talk about? I actually know what I'm going to talk about. I saw a Facebook post that said, it was more eloquent than this. It was kind of long. It was a little bit nuanced. It wasn't just yes or no, left or right, right or wrong, black or white. It was something like, parents want to control what their kids learn in school, but what if their parents are wrong? Well, what if the school board is wrong? What if the teacher is wrong? If there should be some oversight above the school level, I would say, yeah, there's probably no question about that. Should there be oversight of each teacher? Yeah, I say in every school there is, private, public, charter. Teachers have always been subject to parents' approval and almost always subject to principals' approval. I don't think we need cameras in the classroom recording 24 hours. Well, I mean, you can record it, that's cheap, but you can't pay somebody to watch it 24/7. What the big tech companies are doing, which is all secret, so this is just my interpretation of what I think they're doing, is they're looking for certain words. So on YouTube, people will say balloon instead of ballot, because you can't say that the election wasn't right. You have to say that the election was the fairest ever. If you say the election was the third fairest election in the history of mankind, then you'll be in trouble. You have to say it was the most, the best, the least trouble of any election ever, or else they'll block it if you use the word ballot. Obviously there's a lot of conjecture in there. Who knows what the algorithms and the computer programs are actually saying. But the point I'm making is people on YouTube just use the word balloon instead of ballot, or they use the word Corolla instead of Corona, because you can't talk about Corona. Now the people at Facebook and YouTube and presumably Google, since YouTube is owned by Google, they may have good intentions, and they may think that they need to police news about the coronavirus, and they think they may need to police views about the election, because they may actually believe in their heart, without any doubt, that the CDC has never been wrong, and that the election was the safest ever. They might believe that. Well, the parents who believe that the earth was created in 6 days believe that too. Who has the right to decide which is correct? What I was taught over and over and over was the theory of evolution. So they would call it the theory, presumably so that the people in the room who believed in the 6-day creation model wouldn't be offended, because it was just a theory. But the understanding by most people was that the theory was correct. So using the word theory was a way of teaching it without saying, you're wrong, your church is wrong. So some of the beliefs do come from churches, some of the beliefs do come from political differences, and people who can tell that education is liberal. And then there are people who are in education, smart people, leaders in education. So obviously educated and care about education and care about kids, who don't realize that education is liberal. Well, they're not seeing the forest for the trees. Education is liberal. I think in the true sense, or in the former sense of the word liberalism was great, but now it's just gone off the rails, and the people who haven't exactly gone off the rails don't see the fringes of the liberal movement. They just see the fringes of the conservative movement, and they think that that is indicative of the entire conservative movement. And maybe that's going on both sides, and maybe it's, left and right, two wings of the same bird, and I only notice one side of the bird's wings than the other. That's pretty unclear. Let me say that differently. Left and right are not right and wrong. Conservative and liberal are not wrong and right. They are two poles of an issue of who is in charge. Is the big government going to save us, or are we responsible for ourselves? Is one way to characterize it. And the people who naturally take responsibility for their own lives don't see how a big government is not going to encourage other people to take control of their own lives. So the argument of, the government wants to create an underclass by keeping people on welfare rather than having them be self-sufficient enough to escape welfare, so they make it easy to get it and easy to stay on it, is something that those people can't see, because they themselves aren't on welfare. They themselves aren't part of an underclass. They themselves think that their feelings are so important that if they feel bad for those poor people, that helps those poor people. Whereas I and many other people think, teach a man to fish and he'll either fish or he won't, as opposed to give him a fish and he'll either eat this one meal or not eat this one meal. So the question is bigger. And what really drove it home for me is when those people, those liberals, got mad when conservatives said, we're offering our hopes and prayers, we're offering our prayers and something like that. So the conservatives were saying, we're thinking of you. And the liberals were saying, oh, don't think of them, give them some money. But really what's going on, in my opinion, is the liberals are valuing their own feelings so much. And of course they validate those feelings with their money. But they're valuing their feelings so much. They're valuing their feelings more than the people's feelings who they think that they're helping. If you want to help someone, go ahead and teach them how to fish, right? Go ahead. So we've got this underclass who doesn't benefit from this largesse, which keeps the liberals feeling good about themselves. All actions have something to do with ourselves. We feel good when we do something, so we're getting something out of it. But if we pretend like we're just doing it for other people, we are condescending to them. They need to think for themselves. They are not the enemy. They are not the victim. They are not the other. They can be just as right or aware or happy or productive or self-reliant as us. And if we just give people stuff in the wrong way at the wrong time, it does create an underclass, I believe. But confusing the issue is there's always going to be a continuum. But I know that if people do not concentrate on their victimhood, they will be better off. Now, they should probably identify it. They should probably come to terms with it to some degree. But they shouldn't point the finger at everybody else. Because what they are doing, and I'm talking about these educated, liberal, well-meaning people who I believe are misguided, what they are doing is they're putting themselves above the victim and above the people who don't think we should have a big government that gives everything away. In the past, I don't know, the medieval model of Western civilization, the church handled charity. The church handled the poor. And the government didn't handle the poor at least as much. Well, I don't know why exactly, but the church stopped doing it. The government stepped in. And to a certain degree, both of those things take away self-reliance. But if we had, let's say, a pioneer farming community, are the neighbors gonna let the people starve who didn't plant the wheat and don't have anything to eat? Maybe, probably not. In some countries, it seems that there were huge amounts of underclass, and right now I'm thinking of Russia, and they just lost their serfdom and picked up their proletarianism, and it seemed to not be too much better, but the ideology changed. So instead of the czar on top of the church, so church and state entwined, and instead of presumably are understood as God deciding who's a serf and who's a royal, it became, let's kill all the royals, or at least bring them down to our level. Well, some people think that you cannot raise everyone up by knocking the top down. Let me say that differently. Some people think that if you get rid of all the billionaires, you don't make the poor people richer, and I think that's so obvious. Dear liberal woman who thinks that she is better because she's white, but she feels bad about it, so she wants to give money to the government to help the black people, but she doesn't know any black people. Dear woman, I know you're well-meaning, but what is it exactly that you're doing? You're assuaging your guilt because you think white is bad, which in itself is actually racist as opposed to pretend racist. And self-loathing doesn't help anyone, including yourself. I'm not saying that you should research where you came from and start wearing folk costumes and clogging and Irish dancing, but you could, and it wouldn't be evil. But just because you feel bad about yourself, that doesn't bring the other people up. I don't think that black and white was ever a good way to divide people, since most people are brown. But for some reason, we've got that dichotomy, or whatever, dimorphism. And it's so dumb. Because the black and white person have a brown person. And presumably, with enough time, everybody's going to be brown. And who cares? I don't think anybody really cares. I mean, I don't think many people really care. But we'll see. The Corolla and balloon overreach of the government. You know, it's easy to say the government's evil, but it's also easy to say the church is evil. But I think that every organization keeps the individual problems of each member, even though they try to do something good, what they really do is they just self-perpetuate and waste a lot of time, and organizations are about the only way to get things done, but they're also the least common denominator. They have all the problems of the individuals that are within them, and people are not just one issue. So again, we're back to the other, those people. And we all do it. We have to categorize in order to think. But people are not left and right. But the news is. So, what do they have in common, left and right news? They're all telling us to be afraid. And we are not given a spirit of fear by the good guy. So, as we've got this early Christmas going on, this early COVID Christmas music and peppermint drinks in November, let's hope it's a good one without any fear.